we all carry a lot of collective trauma, right? Like you study in history class what the heck humanity has gone through in wars and famines and droughts and dictatorial regimes and whatnot, right? And it's been going on ever since this inverted matrix started 10,000, was it 10,000 years ago? However long it's been. So it's thousands of years of worth of this kind of collective trauma in in our beings, in our DNA that we're carrying. And as we go through this, there's a certain fatigue that's happening around waiting, waiting for things to shift, or how long is this going to take? Would you guys agree that you feel this way on some level? How long is this going to take? What's happening? And there's a need to hold on to hope, right? There's a need to sort of hold on to that feeling of hope, and that yes, this is going to shift at some point. So what I want to share is that the trauma is what we're all going to need to really work on coming soon, because the trauma that we're all carrying, which is what I talked about a bit earlier on with CJ, is what is sort of keeping us in this place of, I need to create my own bubble. I can't handle what's going on out there, right? And we don't need to focus on what's going out there, for sure. We don't need to do that. Because what I'm finding in myself and in other people is like we want to kind of stay in this place of a 5D bubble, right? Which is great. It's important to stay in the 5D bubble. But then there's also an aspect of kind of spiritual bypass of, don't tell me about something that might be coming down the road, because I I can't handle that right now. And the spiritual bypass programming is, oh well, if you start to look at that, you're creating it. Okay. And what I want to say is that's totally true. You will be creating it if you're focusing on it with a negative standpoint, right? And what I like to do is I always like to go to the galactics, because if we're learning to be sovereign beings, then they're our model of sovereign beings, right? So I always go to the galactics and go, hey, how are you guys handling all this? And I see them. They don't shy away from anything. Okay. They see everything for what it is, and they don't pretend, and they don't stay in a bubble. Their frequency does not lower anytime there's a possibility of something happening that we as a human consider negative. Okay. They don't shy away from it. And their frequency doesn't lower into fear when something like that shows up. And so what I hear from a lot of people, and I've talked to Franco once about this as well. He's like, well, when I talk about this stuff, people get spooked. So I'm like, instead of avoiding talking about something that we may need to like actually be proactive about, we need to look at the part of us that's getting spooked, right? And what it does is it triggers that old trauma. And when it triggers that old trauma, our nervous system gets jarred, our breathing changes, we go into anxiety, we go into panic. Okay. And so I've noticed that in many people that I've interacted with. So what I want to say is that we all need to start processing our own trauma. Okay. And in order to do that, you really do need to go into the trauma and see where it's coming from. Okay. It may come from, and it's always connected to something in our own experience. So it may come from a time where we got singled out in school and then made fun of, right? Created trauma. It may come from the time where we needed to go get a needle. And as a little kid, that creates trauma. So we all need to start to look at where our own trauma is, and then start to hold space for it. Now, regardless of how uncomfortable it makes us, we need to do that, okay? So that we can go, oh yeah, this could happen, and not go into like kind of mode about it, okay? Go, yeah, okay, that could be a reality, but you know what? I'm a super duper 5D being, and I'm going to transmute it like that. It's okay, I'm going to be okay. So that's where we all need to go. Those of you who know how to do those, have tools on your own to process trauma, start doing so. If you don't, then that's something that can be done in a group setting where we start to unravel, unpack the different layers of trauma that everybody is carrying, right? Because anytime we hear about, especially authority issues, I really want to do a separate group program on dealing with authority and that fear that it brings up in all of us around handling authority, okay, or what we deem as authority. Because those are the kind of things that going forward, as you know, some of these agendas start to play out a little bit more, if they play out a little bit more, regardless of whether they do or not, these are all parts of us that we're still in fear of, right? So these are all programs that are holding us back and programs that are keeping our frequency from fully embodying a sovereign warrior light worker being, okay? Which is what a lot of the galactics are, okay? Nothing phases them. Right? Nothing phases them. And they don't go into, well, we are all one. Yeah, yeah, rah, rah, rah. They don't go into that. They already know that inside. They don't need to like have a fan cheering club to do that. They already know that inside. And they are okay with whatever comes their way or doesn't come their way. They're neutral about it. Okay. So that's something I really want us all to work on at some point. So if you're feeling the despair, just know that's why it's there. Okay. If you're feeling the despair, that's why it's there. It's not because you really want to check out. It's because the way things are right now, there's a lot of unknown, everything's in limbo, and it can bring up those old traumas from the collective and from your lineages. Okay. So you've got the trauma from the lineage that you've been born into, because there's been a lot of persecution in a lot of lineages and a lot of ethnicities. And then you've got the trauma of the collective of the 3D world of humanity.